The best JRPG I've played in a long time is Chinese. That's the first thought I had after finishing Wandering Sword. It's an indie RPG inspired by classic Wuxia stories, blending gorgeous HD 2D visuals with deep progression systems, rewarding exploration and satisfying build crafting. If you're a fan of stories like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or cultivation manuals like Apotheosis or Martial Peak, you'll feel right at home. And if you're completely new to Wuxia, Wandering Sword is also one of the best introductions to the genre. The game is set in a fictional version of ancient China where the reigning dynasty is in decline and war is looming on the horizon. Corruption runs rampant, bandits and pirates prey on the innocent, and martial sects are competing for power and influence across the land. The story follows Yuan Yi, a young man on what should have been a routine escort mission with his friends. Instead, they got caught up in the middle of a deadly clash between these rival sects. The ambush leaves his friends dead and Yuan Yi barely alive, saved only by the very man he was hired to escort. From there, he begins his journey through the martial world, setting him on a path of revenge, self-discovery, and becoming a true martial artist. The narrative, while not exactly groundbreaking, is well written and fully embraces its wuxia roots. Rivalries, loyalties, revenge, and personal growth all take center stage, making the journey feel like a classic martial arts adventure. Every martial sect has its own philosophy, every major NPC has their own motivations, and most of the side characters receive enough development to feel like genuine parts of the world rather than characters who simply exist to move the plot forward. In a world this rich, it certainly helps that it looks as good as it does. Let's talk about the visuals. HD 2D presentation is absolutely stunning. It perfectly captures the look and feel of classic wuxia novels brought to life. Every environment feels handcrafted, and the layout of each town reflects its role in the world. Prosperous trade hubs are larger and busier, while smaller villages feel peaceful and self-sufficient with their farms and their livestock or fishing boats lining up the riverbanks. It's these little environmental details that make the world feel truly lived in. The game also does a fantastic job of creating memorable locations, from bamboo forests where sunlight filters through the leaves, to the towering stone staircases and courtyards of Wudang, and the iconic pagoda forest of Shaolin. Every region has its own distinct identity. Combined with the isometric camera, the environments feel far larger and grander than they actually are, perfectly capturing the romanticized world of wuxia. The animations themselves are fairly simple, but they work surprisingly well with the pixel art style. Character movements are somewhat limited, with most attacks sharing the same base animation, but the visual effects more than make up for it. From your simple key-infused sword slashes to your dragon summoning fist techniques, every martial art has its own visual identity. As you unlock stronger techniques, the spectacle only grows, making every new skill feels as exciting to watch as it is to use. I think Wandering Sword's greatest strength is its combat. Battles take place on a simple tactical grid, and the game lets you switch between turn-based and real-time. While certain weapons and abilities feel awkward to use in real time, pairing it with the x2 speed mode and auto battle, grinding becomes quick and painless. The tactical side of combat is fairly straightforward. Positioning matters, with attacks from the sides or behind dealing more damage and hitting more often. My only criticism is that it's too easy to get behind enemies, so positioning never feels as important as it could have. Something like attacks of opportunity or maybe formation bonuses would have added another layer of strategy. The real depth of the combat comes from the game's extensive build crafting. There are 5 weapon types, each with their own range, attack patterns, and martial arts. On top of that are the cultivation methods, which provide powerful active and passive effects, which becomes the foundation of your build. And as you level them up, you'll unlock meridians, a sort of perk tree that lets you improve your base stats or gain more useful passive bonuses. One of the more unique features of Wandering Sword is how progression is tied to the people you meet. Instead of simply unlocking new abilities by leveling up, you'll learn martial arts by interacting with NPCs through the game's consulting mechanic, or by engaging them through a friendly duel, or by simply exploring the world. It makes every NPC feel like a potential mentor, and every new town worth exploring because you never know what techniques or cultivation methods you might uncover next. As you explore the world, you'll naturally come across more quests and recruitable companions. This is one of the areas where Wandering Sword really stands out from most JRPGs. While there are still the occasional fetch quests, a large portion of the side content feels genuinely meaningful. Quest outcomes and rewards can change depending on the choices you've made, the NPCs you've spoken to, the companions you've brought with you, or which locations you've explored first. Some quests can unlock powerful martial arts or new companions, while others have consequences that carry over into the main story, sometimes determining whether certain characters live, die, or even become stronger. There are over 20 recruitable companions throughout the game, ranging from temporary allies to permanent party members. What I really like is that most of them feel like actual people who exist in the world, rather than just extra party members. They each have their own goals, personalities, and story arcs, and many remain involved long after you've recruited them. They'll reappear during major story moments, open up new quests, and sometimes even influence how certain events would unfold, making the entire journey feel much more interconnected. That said, not every companion receives the same level of attention. A small handful feel like they were never fully finished. Once you've completed their recruitment quest, they almost disappear from the narrative, only showing up again during the ending slides. Thankfully, they're the exception rather than the rule. The companions who do receive proper development become some of the game's strongest characters, growing alongside you and Yi, and making your party feel less like a collection of units and more like a group of people sharing the same journey. The controls and interface are simple and easy to pick up. The game does a decent job of introducing its core mechanics, but it doesn't do the best job of explaining how some of its deeper systems interact. With martial arts, cultivation methods, lightness skills, meridians, and weapon masteries all feeding into each other, character building can feel a little overwhelming during the first few hours. And as your party grows, the interface also starts to show its limits. You'll spend a surprising amount of time on the menus, managing equipment and teaching manuals to your party members. It never becomes difficult, just tedious. A few quality of life features like being able to teach a manual to every eligible party member at once would have gone a long way. The English localization is also much better than I expected. There are a few awkwardly translated lines here and there, but they're so infrequent that I honestly can't remember any specific examples. It never got in the way of enjoying the story. As for controls, I played the game with keyboard and mouse, and I'd recommend doing the same. The game technically supports controllers, but navigating menus takes noticeably more button presses than simply clicking a mouse. Hopefully, that's something the developers refine before the planned console release in 2027. I'd like to talk a little about the game's audio. Outside of combat, the music is excellent. Traditional Chinese instruments give every town, temple, mountain path its own identity, perfectly reinforcing the game's Wuxia atmosphere. Where it falls a little short is during regular battles. Considering how much combat you'll be doing, There are only two alternating battle teams, and when paired with the fairly simple combat backdrops, encounters can start to feel a little bit repetitive over time. Thankfully, the major boss fights receive much more attention. Story bosses have their own unique themes, while many of the optional and regular bosses alternate between a few different tracks, adding some much needed variety. There's also no voice acting, but I honestly didn't mind. For a $25 indie RPG, I'd much rather the developers focus their budget on delivering a polished game with this much content than spend it on voice performances. I went into Wandering Sword not expecting much. I thought it was going to be another indie JRPG, but not with a Wuxia skin. Instead, I found one of the most memorable RPGs I've played in recent years. It captured its spirit, from its gorgeous HD 2D presentation and beautifully crafted world to its rewarding exploration, satisfying build crafting, and interconnected quest design. Wandering Sword constantly gives you a reason to keep playing. Even after dozens of hours, I was still discovering new martial arts, companions, and questlines. While it's not perfect, the tactical combat could use more depth, party management becomes tedious in the late game, and a handful of companions don't receive the attention they deserve. But those issues never overshadow what the game does exceptionally well. What surprised me the most is how confidently it stands alongside the RPGs that inspired it. Understand what makes classic JRPG so compelling, then gives that formula an identity entirely on its own. True World of Luxia. What surprised me the most is how confidently it stands alongside the JRPGs that inspired it. It understands what makes classic JRPG so compelling, then gives that formula an identity entirely its own through the world of Wuxia. If you're a fan of classic JRPGs, tactical RPGs, or Wuxia stories, Wandering Sword is an easy recommendation. It's one of the best RPGs I've played in recent years, and without a doubt, one of the finest games available today.